Welcome to the 16th Sunday after Pentecost. Our gospel today was summed up by Dr. King as telling us about the inescapable network of mutuality. You are to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, so that you may take hold of the life that really is life. In the name of our God's inescapable network of mutuality. Amen. Here's a math problem for you this morning. The three selfish sons of an Arabian camel herder inherited his 17 camels. Half of the camels, the oldest, were for the oldest son. 1/3 of his 17 camels went to his middle son, and 1/9 of the camels went to the youngest. 17 camels. Half would be 8.5 older camels. 1/3 of the 17 middle-aged camels would be 5 2/3 camels. And 1/9 of 17 youngest camels would be a fraction less than 2 whole camels. Not possible. Each son was too selfish to yield, could not give in any kind of way and generosity to one another. So what could they do? How would you solve the problem without killing any camels? Think about it and about how that could possibly apply to today's gospel. Today's gospel is a story about an anonymous rich man and a poor man named Lazarus. Tradition has given the rich man the Latin name for rich man, which is Dives. In the story, Dives has a feast, Lazarus a famine. One's life on earth is a party, the other misery. As Jesus tells the story, these two are interdependent, although they live in different worlds. As the story is told, the poor man dies and goes to the bosom of Father Abraham, and then the rich man dies and goes to Hades. This is what Walter Brueggemann calls the moment of dreadful equity. The rich and poor are very different in life, very alike in death. A reversal takes place. The first is now last, and the last first. The poor man, Lazarus, sits next to Father Abraham at the table. The rich man, Dives, is in Hades, a place of torment. It is not what we call hell, but not a pleasant place either. There is a word for us in this story, and it is a simple, difficult, necessary word. But if we will listen for it, there is good news. How we are judged has to do with how we treat the poor. That is absolutely, and there rather, is absolutely no ambiguity about this point in the Bible. It is clear from Moses to Amos, Hosea to Micah, Jesus to Paul. And it is clear in this story, we, the rich, have received our reward. The poor will receive their reward in the life to come. How will we be judged depends, in large measure, on how we relate to the poor. The law and the prophets have prepared us for it, if we will listen. And in this teaching of Jesus, we are confronted with the matter yet again. Where are the poor in our world, and how do we treat them? Our Bibles teach us not to harvest every last bit, but to leave some so that the poor, the gleaners, the alien might eat and be filled. Why? Because God says you were aliens in Egypt, and I heard your cries. We are given a choice, and that is to connect with the poor or to separate ourselves from them, but at our eternal peril. The most powerful image in this story is of a big chasm, a giant ditch that separates the rich and the poor. Our calling is to strengthen the connections between rich and poor while there is yet still time. Every time one of us serves at a food bank, that chasm becomes a little less significant. Every time one of us visits someone in a jail, that chasm becomes a little easier to cross. Every time one of us takes time to listen to a brother or a sister who reaches out to us for help, the communication chasm is breached. Every time one of us practices a random act of kindness, a chasm becomes a little less important. This is a fact. The chasm between rich and poor is not only economic and sociological, it is biblical and spiritual. I love Dr. Martin Luther King's commentary on this parable. Here it is. There is nothing in this parable that says Dives went to hell because he was rich. Jesus never made a universal indictment against all wealth. In the story of the rich young ruler, when Jesus tells the man to go, sell all that he has, and give his money to the poor, Jesus was prescribing individual surgery, not setting forth a universal diagnosis. And in that long-distance telephone call that takes place between Dives in hell and Abraham with Lazarus in heaven, old Dives finds out that he went to hell not because he was rich, but because he passed by Lazarus every day and never really saw him. Dives went to hell because he allowed Lazarus to become invisible, because he failed to use his wealth to bridge the gulf that separated them. In fact, he didn't even realize that Lazarus was his brother. If Dr. King was right, this is not primarily a text about poverty, about our wealth, or even about the proper allocation of resources. This is a text about vision. This is a text in which Jesus calls us to confront the reality that every day we pass by people who are in desperate need, in obvious ways and in far deeper, less obvious ones, but we walk right by. Needs are not met. Children remain homeless. Families remain trapped in desperate fear and loneliness. One of the reasons that poverty is so difficult to confront is because it forces us to look into the eyes of people who are not as different from us as we would like to believe, and hear their stories, and walk with them in their struggles, and really see the pain living in their eyes. Once again, in the words of Dr. King, I submit this is a challenge facing the church, to be as concerned as our Christ about the least of these, our brothers and sisters. And we must do it because in the final analysis, we are all to live together. Rich and poor, lettered and unlettered, tutored and untutored, somehow we are tied in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We are tied in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, so that you may take hold of a life that really is life. In the name of our God's inescapable network of mutuality. Amen. Oh, yes, the 17 camels, divided in half, in thirds, and into ninths. Did you figure it out? The selfish boy's problems were solved by a generous neighbor who gave the boys her one old camel, all she had. So now the boys had 18 camels. Half of 18 is 9, a third of 18 is 6, and a ninth of 18 is 2. But 9, 6, and 2 are 17. So the boys realized something about generosity and gave that youngest camel back to the woman next door, but they didn't give her the same one. They gave her one of the youngest camels. And that camel was pregnant. The moral of the story, when you give in generosity, it comes back to you, dwelling as we do in an inescapable network of mutuality. Amen.